Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Habit Shift podcast. I am joined with Jeff, Sarah, and Sandy. I am, of course, Ian Bickle, and today we have a little special episode. We are going to do a Q&A. We've got a few questions from people that we can go through. If you do have any questions in the future, just you can send them to us directly, or you can email thehabitshift@gmail.com and just ask something and we will answer it on the podcast. We have the question maestro ready. Sarah,
Ready to go.
I'm terrible at reading, so
Okay. Wow. Okay. So we've got two, first of all, from the Habit Shift Facebook group. So thank you for submitting these questions. The first one is from Craig, and he actually wants a bit of clarification on how to go about gaining weight. He thinks it's a topic that isn't talked about very often. The emphasis is always on weight loss rather than weight gain. And he said, some people do actually really struggle with gaining weight. So that is the first question to kick us off. Thank you, Craig.
who's going first?
So I'll just drop in a really quick one, and then I'll let Ian and Sandy and Sarah jump in on maybe some specifics. But one thing that can be challenging with gaining weight, which I think a lot of people kind of either don't understand or because it's not really talked about as much, is just like we have issues with losing weight, with decreasing our size, our bodies have this set point that it likes to sit around. And so not only does it resist the change to decrease our size, so when we lose weight, we have this metabolic adaptation that can occur that dials back our energy expenditure, increases our appetite, making it kind of fights us on that. The same can happen in gaining weight too. If we're trying to push our body past a set point, then we tend to have to do things to keep it at that level beyond its natural set point. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it can be really challenging, and which I think some people think is, that's a protective effect. It prevents our body from getting larger than its ideally functioning size. But at the same time, it can be frustrating when you're actually trying to increase your body mass for performance reasons. If you're in a sport and you just want to be a little bigger so that you can make a little bit more of an impact and that kind of thing.
I think it's a really good point, actually, isn't it? Because I think, when you actually say that comment, or I want to gain weight, people go, oh, I wish I had that problem. But actually, that, you don't know what that person's feeling. And that person that is underweight
Yep.
can feel just as much stigma as somebody that's overweight. And, it's just that it's not talked about as much and it's
Mm-hmm.
not maybe as common as being overweight, but that doesn't mean that the effects aren't the same. So I think, that's the first thing to do when you are looking at people. Just don't judge them on their body, whether they are bigger, smaller, skinny, fat, whatever you want to call it. Just don't judge them, full stop. But from a practical point of view, I guess it depends what weight we're talking about. Are we talking about gaining muscle, or are we talking about being underweight and wanting to actually just put on some weight, full stop?
I think for guys,
Here we go.
yeah, no, there she's back.
Let's just talk over each other.
So for guys, as you said, like being underweight, like it does kind of impact like how you feel taking your top off and all of that sort of stuff. I know Craig, like I work with Craig, and like for me, knowing that he essentially was under eating massively and as a result lost a huge deal of muscle mass. And I think as a guy, and even as a girl to a certain point, like when we're talking about our body composition, there's a certain look that we kind of have in our mind. So for the most part, people still want to remain somewhat toned, with a little bit of muscle mass. So if we're primarily going to be aiming for muscle accumulation, we'll have to train first and foremost. Like if there's no signal for muscle growth to occur, there needs to be some force, some resistance that our body's placed under. So for example, the elderly, just simply getting them walking, that might be enough like overload in their muscles to support the drive of muscular growth or hypertrophy. but obviously for younger population who are active, that's not going enough. So over time, you need to put your body under enough force and an additional force and progressively overload and add more load, weight, reps, set, however you're going to do that, what's called mechanical tension, in order to induce that response. So first and foremost, we have to train. Secondly, we have to eat enough protein and on par, eat enough calories as well. So as Jeff said, it is kind of energy balance, but the body is kind of fighting us. So there's overeating studies where people have been given 1,000 calories above their predicted total daily energy expenditure just to see what happens. And some people gain huge quantities of weight, whereas some people don't, just based off their increase in like non-exercise associated thermogenesis. So, when you are working out maybe calories, that's all off like a predictive formula. And it's until you've actually ate that food and recognize how your body responds to that, you might have to eat more. And this is what was said to Craig, is like, sorry, mate, you got to eat more. And he's got a really active job as well. And some days he'll be accumulating like 20,000 steps. I'm like, mate, like you're going to have to supplement your diet with calorie dense food. And this is where junk food can come in, or really calorie dense food, nuts, peanut butter, liquid calories, all of that sort of stuff. It's cheaper as well. So if you're on a budget and trying to eat that amount of calories in clean food or minimally processed food, you're going to that's going to have its financial costs. Like my biggest probably outgoing is food, but like I really value obviously good food and health and what that brings along from a performance and potential muscle growth perspective. And that, I guess, like just good quality protein as well, as that's where the main expense is coming from.
So I was just going to add to what Ian was saying, because I guess with weight gain, we're really talking about muscle gain. And in order to do that, yes, we need to eat more calories. And like Ian said, you're going to have to eat more calorie dense foods sometimes. You can't just eat clean or eat lots of protein and vegetables. At some point you do have to add in something else that's going to give you those calories, especially if it's someone like him who does do a lot of activity, has an active job, and also you add training onto that as well. You do need the calories from somewhere. When it comes to women, I think that they're, scared to put on a little bit of muscle, and they tend to think that, they're going to end up looking huge. But you do have to be in a surplus of calories to actually gain muscle. And you have to sort of expect as well that you will be putting on a little bit of body fat along with that. So, it's going to be dependent on how much muscle, I guess, you want to gain, and how long you want to do that for, before you start cutting back. But I'm not sure where it sort of lies. You might be able to tell me, Ian, with the recommendations of how much that you gain per month. Is it like half a kilo per month, roughly?
Yeah, I mean, who makes the recommendations is always my question. Yeah. And I think for me, it depends on that person's how long they've been in the game. For somebody that's advanced, it's going to be far less. So it might be like half a kilo per month or something, which is really how can you even measure that versus someone who's a complete beginner who might be looking at a couple of kilos per month. I guess it's always kind of staying on top of like photos and even calipers and stuff like that. But as you said, I think a lot of even males this day and age fear weight, like fat gain. And, you know, they're a couple of weeks into a mass or a bulk, and then they're cutting. And it's just the body absolutely does nothing. So you have to commit. And the idea that for natural competitors, you know, or natural athletes or people who are trying to gain muscle, like, you know, it's not going to be just all lean muscle mass accumulated. And like, I think social media is to blame for this as well. Just everybody on social media in your bubble is lean, and then you're getting like a little bit kind of, and that this is that you've got to think about the big picture. Don't touch a diet for years. So like in between my diet, like dieting phases, like could be 2-3 years, because that's what's necessary. But I think a lot of people, you know, they're like, it's almost like fat phobia. And I think women suffer from it even more because, and they go on, like, muscle growth's easy. It's bloody not. It's like, it's,
you
know,
don't
like,
accidentally get big.
Yeah, you got to train. You've got, like, you know, early on, like, sure enough, like doing just some quite simple stuff. But once you kind of get over that beginner phase, like, the real test is the test of time and patience and consistency, because you're not going to see fast, rapid results. But that's from that's from a marketing perspective. That's where people try and sell you on. It's like, hey, join my program. You can do the Booty Blaster 5,000 12-week program, and you're going to have a bum like this, and they'll show some Latino woman who's got the genetics of a Latina who does all these weird band exercises and all this just crap, and people fall for it. Rant.
Add anything, or should we go on to the next question?
No, I think that's great. Yeah.
Okay. So the next one from within the group was from Charlotte. And she has said she would love to know more about the drop in hormones from your late 30s. This is for women, and that effect on people's weight management. So I think what we're talking about here is sort of going in towards sort of perimenopause, which can happen. Hormones can start to change from your late 30s onwards. It's more common in early 40s, mid 40s for women, leading towards an average age of menopause about 51. That can be later and can be earlier. I mean, everybody is different. But I think realistically what she's asking is, how does this affect people's weight and how they manage their weight? Because people will always say, oh, I'm, you know, going into menopause and I've gained loads of weight. So has anyone got, I've obviously got some things to say, but has anyone else got anything, any input on this?
There's a fairly recent study come out, isn't it? Like, that's been quite popular within our kind of circle in regards to like changes in metabolic rate from around the age of 20, like basal metabolic rate, from the age of around 20 to, was it around 60 or so?
I think so, yeah.
And
60.
it kind of showed, a lot of people are going to be upset with this, that it kind of doesn't really change until like them elder years. But I think what does change hugely is people's lifestyles. And I think like it's hormones quite often are an easy go-to because the rules still apply. It's still about calorie balance. But it's like hormonally, if things start going a little bit wrong, that's where it can impact like hunger signals and energy expenditure and something like that. And maybe like predicted BMR might be lower, but given the nature of that study, it seems to suggest that's not really the case. And it's usually that total daily energy expenditure that is the contributing factor. So that NEAT goes down and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents worth. It's like, is it the hormonal shifts or is it life?
Yeah. Sandy?
I was just going to say, there's no doubt that, you know, there's stuff going on that upsets, you know, your daily life, like probably not so much in perimenopause, but that can differ from person to person as well. I guess I got a little bit of hot flashes when I was in perimenopause, but more so when I was in menopause. But you know, all of those little things, loss of sleep, you know, all of those things can impact what you do on a day-to-day basis. So like Ian said, you know, it's easy to blame hormones, but it's really just those little things that are impacting your activity, making you move less. You're not doing as much because of those things. You tend to eat more because of it. So yeah, those sort of things. It's not really your hormones that are doing the damage, so to speak. It's more so your activity levels reducing and just eating more. I mean, your fat distribution also changes as you go into menopause. So women tend to hold on to their body fat more around their stomachs. It shifts into different areas. Yeah, so yeah, don't blame the hormones.
Jeff, you got anything you want to say on this topic?
Yeah, I think really my advice would be to get curious and explore what it is exactly that is possibly changing as a result of the hormones, because I think the hormones is a very real thing. They change for men too, but especially for women, I think more so. But over time, they change, and it's easy to say, "Oh, I'm in menopause or premenopause or whatever," and to say my hormones are changed, or I gained all this weight or whatever, or I'm getting extra fat around the midsection, and then just start attacking it with a diet instead of saying, well, what is it that's changed that may be resulting in me gaining this excess fat? Because yes, you can put yourself on a diet and maybe reduce that fat, but if you don't address the underlying issues, it's probably going to come right back on as soon as you stop, which is then going to put you in this perpetual cycle of diet restriction, possibly feeling bad about yourself, getting to where you're like, okay, now I really like how I'm looking. And then when you ease up a little because you can't continue to maintain that, then it comes back on and you feel bad about how you look now, even though you may be at a lower place than you were when you started. And you know, just that whole cycle that can perpetuate. And so, yeah, like, you know, Sandy was mentioning sleep. If what's happening is that you're not getting enough sleep, and so therefore you don't have the energy to put so much into your physical activity, then you know, address the sleep. Sometimes it may be a pharmacological thing that you need to do. There may be hormone issues that are going on that can be managed by seeing your endocrinologist. All of these things that could be managed apart from putting yourself onto a diet. And I think a lot of people, the initial response is, I have more fat than I used to, I need to go on a diet, instead of, I have more fat than I used to, I wonder what happened there. Let's see what happened. Let's see what's going on in my life, what changed, and then addressing those different things. And it may or may not result in fat loss, but at least you're addressing those underlying issues that may be contributing negatively to your health.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got to be really careful though as well, like with a kind of the snake oil industry.
Yeah.
Oh,
around hormones, particularly because it's such a sensitive area for women. I feel a bit uncomfortable talking about it because like I'm not a woman, not on a weekday anyway.
So, 7 points, who knows?
If we did this podcast on a Friday night, I'd have my blouse on and everything. But no, like obviously like hormones, and like a lot of people are just like, right, yeah, fix your hormones. And I think because a lot of people feel they don't have a control over that, but this person has the answer for that. There's just a lot of supplements out there that have very limited evidence, if any. And you know, ironically, a lot of people to fix your hormones, it generally is eating a better diet anyways. But like, it's just be very careful, be very wary. Sorry there, Sarah.
Yeah, no, you're right, you're spot on. I was going to say that. And actually, you know, normally when we talk about nutrition issues and all the rest of it. It's we've always got it depends, and it's sort of a bit grey, and we've got this middle area where there's lots of areas we can go down. But actually with that one, it is pretty black and white. Women start to lose their hormones decline, and the only way of fixing those hormones is to replace them, and that's it. There is no pill, there is no herb out there that is going to do the same thing, especially at a cost of £250 for a consultation and a private supplement at all. The only thing that's going to replace estrogen is estrogen, and the only thing that's going to replace testosterone is testosterone. And the same with progesterone, which is more of a protective hormone. But everything you guys have all said is true. So Charlotte, there's no, menopause won't just make you gain weight, it's the potential symptoms. And I don't want to underplay women's symptoms, because some women have an absolutely horrific time. And maybe in the future we'll do a podcast on menopause, so we could go into that in more depth. But on this one, we'll try and stick to the weight problem. If you aren't sleeping at night, you are having hot flushes, some women have them all day, all evening, you're going to feel like crap. And so when you feel like crap, you want quick, fast food that you can just grab without thinking. You're not going to get up and go for a walk. You're not going to go to the gym. All those things are what have an effect on your weight gain if you experience it. So it is really time to reflect. And as Jeff said, don't go headlong into a diet and start cutting everything out. Prioritize your sleep first, make that something important. Go for a small walk, get outside, do some mindfulness, some yoga, something that's calming. And if you can, do some strength training, because at this point in time, it's sort of leading from your 30s into your 40s when you really can protect yourself moving forwards. Strength training for your muscles, your bones, walking or doing some form of cardio for your heart and lungs, eating a really, nutritious diet to support your heart health, your bone health, all that sort of thing. All of that will see you in the best place. Try to make those, as you're in your, talking about late 30s, you're in a prime position to get those habits in place before you get to the point where you feel rubbish and then can't do anything about it. The change in fat storage, we can't do anything about that, unless you take HRT, which tends to stop that happening to a degree. That's just a fact of life. We have to kind of own it. We have to accept that as women, that's what's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that you can't change your lifestyle and live a healthy, happy life and not put on lots of weight. It doesn't have to be that way. So I hope that answers that question. I had one which will be a great one for Jeff to start with, was how can I get my kids to eat more veg?
Yeah, that's probably one of the most common questions from parents and stuff. And definitely not using the approach that a lot of parents use, which is bribing, forcing, shaming, holding dessert out as a reward for it. And you might get the response that you want. Like, they may actually eat their vegetables in order to get the prize, but long term that develops generally a very bad relationship with food. I think probably all of us have had clients who we've talked to at times, and we see these different issues they have where they can't stop before they've cleaned off their plate, regardless of how much food was put on it, because when they were a kid, they had to clean their plate in order to get dessert or to leave the table. And so all of these different things can build up over time. And so in general, that's kind of what I would say what not to do is really avoid the bribery kind of thing to get your kids to eat more vegetables. And really what it comes down to is, if you take the pressure off them during the feeding relationship, then they have the ability to feel much more relaxed around food and are typically more willing to try a variety of foods. So, again, this doesn't work for every kid, and not every kid is the same. You do have kids with specific issues that are going to be related to either sensory related issues or other things going on. And so, but in general, just serving a variety of foods and allowing the kids to try them and on their own time. So you might put out vegetables, you might cut them up in different ways, you might season them different ways, you might put them on their plate. And one of the things that a lot of parents will do is that they'll offer their kid a vegetable a couple of times, and then they never eat it, and they think, okay, well, my kid just doesn't like carrots, or my kid doesn't like broccoli. And there's a lot of research in this area, and what they have found is that it's not uncommon at all for it to take 20 or 30 or more times of exposure in a non-pressure environment to a new or unfamiliar food before a child is ready to actually eat that food. And so we have to understand that it takes them time to learn how to eat foods that have different textures, different flavor profiles, and this kind of thing, and to just not give up. So not only do we not put pressure on them, but we don't just make this assumption, oh, they tried it a couple of times and they don't like it. And so so some practical things that you can do is things like I said, kind of present it to them, but also let them explore it. So lick it, smell it, play with it. You know, a lot of times we don't want our kids to play with their food. You know, oh, don't play with your food, don't play with your food. But it can be a great way for them to get exposure to that new food, because often they won't even want to touch it, but then they touch it, and that's actually a big win for a lot of kids. They played with their green beans. They didn't eat it, but they played with it. And then another time they stuck it in their mouth and they spit it out. But that's another step forward in learning to possibly try that particular food. So a lot of these things that I think as parents we often get in the way and disrupt their process of learning to enjoy those foods, and so those can be helpful. And then of course you can put them in different foods. You can not necessarily hide them, but you can put them in different forms, mix them up. A lot of times kids don't like them when they're all together, so you can kind of separate them out and present them in fun or interesting ways. Those are just some other different things that parents can do.
Awesome. And I think that leads on to a question that Ian also had from an adult who also struggles with veg consumption. Do you want to say any more about that, Ian?
Yeah, just kind of like, I think it potentially stems from childhood and maybe poor experiences around like vegetables and maybe being kind of forced to eat. Yeah, it's just kind of how can we get adults like that maybe don't like vegetables or just see them as like an inconvenience, I guess, maybe as preparing them is something, the forms in which like the cost of and all of that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, I always struggle with people that just say they don't like vegetables, because there are so many of them, and I often wonder, how many of you have you tried? How have you cooked them? You know, like Jeff said, there's so many different ways that you can make something taste different. You can boil, you can steam, you can roast, you can puree, you can make into sauces, you can stir fry. You know, every which way has a slightly different texture and taste. So I would say, before people say outright, I don't like vegetables, full stop, have you tried doing them different ways? Have you tried all the different varieties? You know, they're so different as well. You know, if you don't like texture of squishy things, for example, like my son doesn't like squishy things. So you don't like fruit, for example, because you put it in your mouth and you bite it and juice comes out. He doesn't like that. But carrots don't do that, you know, bananas don't do that. So if it's a textural thing, then experiment with other things that don't have what you don't like. You know, that there's nobody that says you have to eat a certain vegetable or fruit or anything, but there might be ones that you actually do like. And I actually, on some things that you said there, Jeff, somebody, it was a program I watched with a chef actually, who was trying to encourage, and it was children, not adults, to eat more vegetables. And, you know, they just made it a really fun experience. So they actually took them to where they grew and they actually picked them from source. You know, they went and picked the veg or the fruit. they then went home and, like you said, played with it really. So they cut it up, they smelt it. There was no pressure for them to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Then they actually cooked it, and they, you know, were participants in the cooking. And then it was put out on the table, and there was, again, no pressure for them to eat. But because they'd had that journey, seeing where it ended up on the table, more often than not, they did actually try it. And then once they tried it, and as you said, a few times, they then actually were like, it's not so bad. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the start of it. So I think for me is be open-minded. Don't say, I don't like, you know, it's a bit like saying I don't like people, which I do say sometimes, but it's a whole different ballgame. But, you know, everyone's different. Everything is different. So, you know, just be experimental, I would say. Sandy, have you got anything you want to add on that old veggie front?
Yeah, that you sort of touched on it was I think the whole exposure thing is a really, really good idea, like especially with children, well, and adults, is just being able to get them involved in preparing the food. I found that, you know, when I got my kids involved in actually, you know, washing the vegetables, cutting it up, and, you know, actually getting them to see how the meal is prepared, sort of made them realize, you know, that, oh, I didn't realize that you put, you know, zucchini in the spaghetti sauce. And, you know, that was just one of my ways of getting some veggies in there to their meals. But yeah, definitely getting them to in the preparation part of it was important. And for my son, he never liked cooked carrot, but when I got him involved in like preparing the meal, he cut the carrots, but then he would eat them raw because that's how he liked them. So whenever I put them on his plate, they were never cooked, they were just raw, and that's just how he liked them. So yeah, I reckon, you know, exposure is really important. And for if it's an adult, I still think that needs to be done. Even if they don't really eat much of it, they need to get in that, you know, going into the vegetable section and picking some things that they think they might like and trying to prepare it in, you know, different ways. Like Sarah said, either, you know, steaming them or roasting them or frying them. You know, there's all different ways of cooking them and making them delicious. It just depends.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful that I think it's really easy for us, at least as adults, we get stuck on this kind of health mindset around vegetables where, you know, what's wrong with deep frying them? You could try that as a way of, I mean, yeah, that's not, quote, healthy in a lot of people's minds, but it can be a way of exposing you to this new unfamiliar flavor or texture of the vegetable. You know, going back to what Sarah had said there about the kids and stuff with that chef, there's actually research supporting that too. There's where kids read these stories about a particular vegetable, and then they are actually much more likely to try that vegetable again. I remember my oldest daughter, she was really picky, and if we got her involved in preparing the meal, then she took some ownership of it, and then she was always willing to eat that. Whereas if we had just prepared it, she probably wouldn't have eaten it. So there's all kinds of things that you can do, and from that standpoint. And one of the big things too is trying to neutralize food to where this works for adults and kids, is getting this mentality out of our head, and for kids, never sticking it in their head that vegetables are kind of a healthy food and you have to eat them because you're supposed to, and you need to eat them so that you can eat the really good stuff later, which is the dessert or the whatever. And so kind of helping them get past this mindset of quote, healthy food that I don't really like, and then the tasty food, and just sort of neutralizing food so that it's kind of on the same level. Because, you know, you think about it, when you go out to a restaurant, is the dessert the only thing that you're thinking about when you go to eat? Or are you also thinking about the delicious grilled chicken and the sauce that's going to go on it and the side of veggies that comes with it? And, you know, when somebody has a healthy relationship with food, that's generally the way that they think about those different foods. And so anything we can do to help, well, you know, with kids and then also with adults to kind of get to that food neutrality mindset, it can be really helpful in that. And not shying away from heaping on sauce or whatever onto the vegetables. I mean, I think that's the other thing too, is you think, okay, I'm trying to eat healthier and I know I need to eat more veggies. And so the natural tendency is to go with steamed or even roasted or whatever. It's like smother that stuff in cheese. I mean, you're still, it's, you know, what's funny is that yes, it adds calories to it. But I was actually listening to a podcast yesterday or the day before, and somebody made this point of, you know, when you have a plate full of vegetables smothered in some kind of a sauce or something that adds a bunch of maybe fat or calories to it, you know, you're still getting all the nutrients from those vegetables that are in there. All those nutrients are still there. It's just you've added on these other things. And if you can find different ways to at least become more familiar with it, then you may start to enjoy it in another form later too. So you started off with it smothered in cheese and you may realize, yeah, I can actually eat this roasted now too.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, like cauliflower cheese, for example, you know, cauliflower and broccoli cheese can be absolutely delicious. You know, if your kids want to dip their veg in tomato ketchup, then go for it, you know. And, you know, the thing you said there about deep frying, you know, now we have air fryers, so you can actually get a similar effect in a healthy way. If you are worried about, you know, giving your kids deep fried food, then you can air fry it, you know, and you can get, just saying you're having chips for tea, and you can make your chips out of, you know, sweet potato, carrots, anything you want, you know, zucchini, courgette, however you want to say it. I mean, air fry those sort of things. And maybe if kids think, oh, I'm having chips, they won't even worry that they maybe are different colours or something. You know, they could be posh chips, you know, they could be anything. You just use your imagination, I guess.
I think like things like soups as well, you know, purees. The person who I was talking about there just hates vegetables like that, you know, can consume them in a soup form. So just liquidize and stuff, but also like processed, like frozen and pre-prepared, because that's sometimes a barrier of entry for people, like cooking things properly. You know, and again, I mean, I've got the look of being qualified and worked as a chef, so like cooking stuff and timings, and it just takes practice. And I think a lot of people like struggle to find that time to, or like believe they don't have that time. And quite frankly, a lot of it is just through trial and error. But that would be my kind of parting shot on that one.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think that wraps up our Q&A for today. I think it's been really good, guys, actually. And I think, you know, if you're listening to this and you have questions, please send them in to us on the group, send us an email, put it on social media, because, you know, no question is ever silly, and we love to help and answer what you actually want to know. So I think we've probably finished for today. So goodbye from all of us.
Goodbye.
Toodles.